You've been bleeding your secrets into every conversation, painting your vulnerabilities across your face like a map for predators to follow. Your openness, that quality you've been taught to celebrate as authenticity, has become the very weapon others use to dismantle your defenses. Every honest confession, every raw admission, every moment of genuine transparency has been catalogued by those who smile while they study you, building a psychological profile that will be used against you when the moment serves their interests. You believed that vulnerability was strength, that showing your wounds would earn you respect, that honesty would attract genuine connection. But look around you now. See how your transparency has been weaponized against your own well-being. The people who encouraged your openness weren't seeking to know the real you. They were mapping your weaknesses, identifying your pressure points, learning exactly how to manipulate your responses when circumstances demanded your compliance. Your childhood taught you that good people share everything, that hiding thoughts was deception, that emotional walls were barriers to love. Society reinforced this programming through endless mantras about authenticity and vulnerability being the pathways to meaningful relationships. You absorbed these lessons so completely that you began to mistake emotional exhibitionism for depth, compulsive disclosure for courage, psychological nudity for intimacy. But here's the truth that no one warned you about. Your openness has made you prey. Every time you revealed a fear, you gave someone a trigger to pull. Every time you confessed a weakness, you handed them a tool for your destruction. Every time you shared a dream, you provided them with leverage to use against your future happiness. You thought you were building bridges, but you were actually constructing your own psychological prison. The most dangerous people in your life aren't the ones who openly oppose you. They're the ones who smile while collecting your secrets, who nod sympathetically while filing away your confessions for future use. They've learned to appear trustworthy precisely because your openness has trained you to mistake attention for affection, interest for investment, curiosity for care. They don't need to ask direct questions when you volunteer every answer. Don't need to probe when you excavate your own weaknesses and present them like offerings at their feet. Your compulsive honesty has created a surveillance state where you are both the watched and the watcher, monitoring your own thoughts and feelings only to broadcast them to an audience that takes notes while pretending to care. The people in your life have become students of your patterns, and you've been their most enthusiastic teacher, showing them exactly where to apply pressure when they need you to break. You've become addicted to the temporary validation that comes from sharing your internal landscape, mistaking momentary attention for lasting connection. But this addiction has cost you something far more valuable than you realized: your psychological sovereignty. You've given away the very mystery that might have protected you, traded your strategic advantage for the hollow comfort of being temporarily understood. Consider how your oversharing has trained others to expect unlimited access to your inner world. They've learned that if they simply wait long enough, ask the right questions, or create the appropriate emotional atmosphere, you'll eventually spill every secret, reveal every vulnerability, confess every weakness. You've conditioned them to see your psychological boundaries as temporary obstacles rather than permanent barriers. Your transparency has also created a dangerous imbalance in your relationships. While you've been revealing everything about yourself, others have learned to share just enough to keep you engaged while protecting their own interests. You've become the primary source of emotional labor, psychological entertainment, and free therapy in most of your connections, giving everything while receiving carefully curated fragments in return. The architecture of your exploitation operates on a simple principle: information asymmetry equals power imbalance. Every piece of yourself that you've freely given away has shifted the balance of control away from you and toward those who possess your secrets while keeping their own. You've armed potential enemies with intimate knowledge of your psychological landscape while remaining largely ignorant of theirs. Look at how predictable you've become. Your friends know exactly what will make you angry, what will make you sad, what will make you cave to their demands. They can manipulate your emotions like buttons on a control panel because you've spent years showing them precisely which levers to pull. Your openness has eliminated the mystery that might have kept you safe from psychological manipulation. In the shadowed halls of Renaissance power, Niccolo Machiavelli understood that information asymmetry was the foundation of all control. He watched princes fall not to external armies, but to their own loose tongues, their need to be understood, consuming their ability to remain strategically mysterious. His warning echoes through 5 centuries. Those who reveal everything possess nothing. For mystery is the only currency that appreciates with scarcity. The moment you become fully known, you become fully predictable. And predictable people are pawns in games they don't even realize they're playing. Machiavelli observed how the most successful rulers were those who revealed their intentions only when revelation served their strategic purposes. They understood that uncertainty creates respect, that mystery generates intrigue, that the unknown portions of their character held more power than the known ones. They kept their thoughts, their plans, their true feelings carefully guarded, sharing them only when disclosure provided clear advantages. You've been operating under the opposite principle, believing that total transparency would earn you trust and admiration. But Machiavelli knew what you're only beginning to discover. People don't respect what they can easily access. They value what remains partially hidden, what requires effort to understand, what maintains elements of mystery even after years of acquaintance. The great manipulators throughout history have succeeded not by revealing themselves, but by encouraging others to reveal themselves. They've mastered the art of creating safe spaces for confession while maintaining their own psychological privacy. They know that the person who knows the most while revealing the least holds all the cards in any interpersonal dynamic. Your openness has made you legible to those who prefer to remain illegible. You've become the readable book in a library of encrypted texts, the transparent window in a house of mirrors. While you've been exposing your psychological architecture, others have been studying the blueprints you've provided, learning exactly how to navigate your internal structure for their own benefit. Machiavelli would have seen your compulsive honesty as a fatal weakness, a strategic error that renders you vulnerable to exploitation by more psychologically sophisticated opponents. He understood that in a world where everyone is competing for advantage, voluntary disadvantage through excessive revelation is a form of psychological suicide. You've confused transparency with intimacy, mistaking the emptying of your inner world for the building of meaningful relationships. But true connection isn't born from total revelation. It's forged in the space between what is shared and what remains sacred, in the tension between disclosure and discretion. Your oversharing has cheapened the very intimacy you sought to create, turning precious vulnerabilities into common currency that loses value with every careless transaction. Those who know everything about you respect nothing about you. Real intimacy requires the presence of boundaries, the existence of private territories that can be selectively opened to deserving individuals. When everything about you is accessible to everyone, nothing about you feels special to anyone. You've democratized your psychological landscape to the point where intimate knowledge of your inner world has become as common as casual acquaintance. The people who truly love you aren't those who demand complete access to your thoughts and feelings. They're the ones who respect your right to maintain private spaces, who understand that healthy intimacy includes healthy mystery. They don't need to possess every aspect of your psychological territory to feel connected to you. They find security in what you choose to share, not anxiety in what you choose to withhold. Your oversharing has actually prevented genuine intimacy by removing the element of choice from disclosure. When you tell everyone everything, no one feels specially trusted with your secrets. when your vulnerability is performed publicly rather than shared selectively. It loses its power to create unique bonds between specific individuals. Consider how your compulsive openness has trained others to expect unlimited psychological access without offering reciprocal transparency in return. You've established patterns where you're the primary revealer, while others become comfortable receivers of your confessions. This dynamic has created relationships where you provide emotional labor while others consume it without offering equivalent vulnerability in exchange. The illusion of connection that comes from one-sided openness is perhaps more dangerous than obvious disconnection. It creates the appearance of intimacy while actually preventing the mutual vulnerability that characterizes genuine closeness. You've been mistaking their attention to your revelations for emotional investment in your well-being, not realizing that curiosity about your psychological landscape doesn't necessarily translate into care for your actual happiness. True intimacy is built through mutual risk, graduated disclosure, and earned trust over time. It requires both parties to selectively lower their defenses rather than one person dismantling all barriers while the other remains strategically protected. Your unilateral emotional nudity hasn't created intimacy. It's created spectatorship, with you as the primary performer and others as the comfortable audience for your psychological exhibitions. While you've been performing vulnerability as virtue, others have been collecting your confessions like ammunition for wars you don't yet know you're fighting. Your openness has given them insider knowledge of your triggers, your fears, your dreams, your breaking points, a complete psychological blueprint they can exploit whenever you become inconvenient to their agenda. They smile and nod as you reveal yourself, but behind their encouraging expressions, they're calculating how to use your honesty against your own interests. The predators in your life don't look like predators. They've learned to disguise their exploitation as empathy, their manipulation as understanding, their collection of your weaknesses as compassionate listening. They've mastered the art of creating environments where you feel safe enough to reveal everything, while they maintain strategic silence about their own vulnerabilities and intentions. These psychological predators understand that the best way to control someone is to let them believe they're choosing to give away their power. They don't force your confessions. They create conditions where you eagerly volunteer them. They've studied your patterns well enough to know exactly what emotional buttons to push to make you spill your secrets. Then they file away every revelation for potential future use. Your need to be understood has made you easy prey for those who understand the value of remaining mysterious. While you've been desperately trying to be known, they've been carefully managing what others know about them. This asymmetry has created relationships where you're psychologically naked while they remain fully clothed, where you're defenseless while they're strategically protected. Consider how your transparency has armed these individuals with intimate knowledge of your emotional triggers. They know exactly what words will devastate you, what situations will overwhelm you, what fears will paralyze you. They possess a detailed map of your psychological landscape that they can navigate whenever they need to manipulate your behavior or silence your resistance to their agenda. The most dangerous aspect of this dynamic is how your openness has taught these predators to appear trustworthy. They've learned to mirror your vulnerability just enough to maintain your trust while keeping their true intentions carefully hidden. They know that if they occasionally share small revelations of their own, you'll continue to provide them with the major confessions that give them power over your emotional state. Your honesty has also made you predictable in ways that serve their interests rather than your own. They can anticipate your responses, manipulate your reactions, and orchestrate situations where you'll behave exactly as they need you to behave. Your transparency has eliminated the uncertainty that might have forced them to treat you as an equal rather than a psychological resource to be exploited. Silence becomes your sanctuary, the fortress of your inner world that no one can breach without your explicit permission. When you learn to hold your thoughts, your feelings, your plans close to your chest, you transform from an open book into a locked vault, forcing others to reveal themselves in their desperate attempts to unlock you. Your silence creates psychological pressure that makes others uncomfortable enough to fill the void with their own confessions, reversing the power dynamic you've unknowingly surrendered through years of voluntary transparency. The strategic withdrawal of your emotional availability creates a vacuum that others will scramble to fill. When you stop being the endless source of psychological entertainment and free therapy that others have grown accustomed to consuming, they're forced to either reciprocate the emotional labor or reveal their true intentions. Your silence becomes a test that separates those who genuinely care about you from those who were simply harvesting your energy. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected, it's about becoming selective with your psychological currency. You learn to spend your emotional energy where it's genuinely valued rather than where it's merely expected. Your thoughts, feelings, and revelations become precious resources that require earned access rather than public utilities available to anyone who expresses casual interest. Your new silence forces others to work for the psychological access they've previously taken for granted. When you're no longer volunteering information about your inner world, people must invest actual effort to understand you. This investment creates a natural filter that separates superficial connections from potentially meaningful ones, since only those who genuinely care will put forth the energy required to earn your trust. The power of strategic silence lies not in permanent withdrawal, but in conscious choice about when, how, and with whom you share your internal landscape. You become the gatekeeper of your own psychological territory, determining who deserves access to different levels of intimacy rather than granting universal admission to everyone who expresses interest. Watch how your silence makes others reveal their true nature. Those who respected you only when you were providing emotional entertainment will lose interest when you stop performing vulnerability. Those who valued your presence only for the psychological resources you offered will drift away when you begin requiring reciprocal investment. Your strategic withdrawal becomes a revelation machine that shows you exactly who was truly present in your life. You begin to understand that the most powerful people in your life aren't those who tell you everything, but those who reveal just enough to keep you intrigued while maintaining vast territories of unknowability. They've mastered the art of strategic disclosure, sharing selected truths that serve their purposes while protecting the core of who they are from casual consumption. Your new mask isn't deception. It's discretion, the sophisticated understanding that your inner world is a privilege to access, not a right to demand. These psychologically sophisticated individuals understand that mystery creates magnetism, that the unknown aspects of their character hold more power than the revealed ones. They share their thoughts and feelings selectively, choosing what to disclose based on strategic considerations rather than emotional impulses. They've learned that partial revelation is more intriguing than total transparency. You begin to model this approach, becoming someone who shares meaningful glimpses of their inner world rather than providing unlimited access to every thought and feeling. You learn to offer selected truths that create connection without surrendering psychological sovereignty. Your interactions become more intentional, your revelations more purposeful, your emotional availability more strategic. This transformation doesn't make you manipulative, it makes you discerning. You're not deceiving others, you're simply recognizing that your inner world is valuable enough to require earned access. You're establishing healthy boundaries around your psychological territory while still maintaining the capacity for genuine intimacy with those who prove worthy of deeper connection. The mask of calculated mystery becomes your protection against those who would exploit your openness while serving as an invitation to those who approach you with genuine respect and reciprocal vulnerability. You learn to gauge others' intentions through their responses to your new boundaries, separating those who respect your psychological sovereignty from those who feel entitled to unlimited access to your inner world. Your strategic discretion creates space for authentic relationships to develop naturally over time, based on mutual respect and graduated trust rather than one-sided emotional exposure. You discover that meaningful connections are built through careful revelation rather than compulsive confession, through earned intimacy rather than performed vulnerability. Watch how relationships shift when you stop being the endless source of emotional labor, psychological entertainment, and free therapy that others have grown accustomed to consuming. Your emotional availability has been treated as a public utility, always accessible, never requiring reciprocal investment from those who benefit from your openness. When you begin to ration your emotional currency, spending it only where it's genuinely valued rather than merely expected, you discover who was truly present in your life and who was simply harvesting your energy for their own emotional needs. The withdrawal of your unlimited emotional availability creates immediate clarity about the true nature of your relationships. Those who valued you primarily as an emotional resource will reveal their frustration when that resource becomes scarce. They'll attempt to manipulate you back into your previous role, using guilt, anger, or emotional blackmail to restore the comfortable dynamic where you provided while they consumed. Others will attempt to maintain the same level of access to your emotional labor while offering nothing in return. They'll act confused or offended by your new boundaries, as if your strategic withdrawal of unlimited psychological availability represents a betrayal of their expectations rather than a healthy assertion of your own needs and limits. But some individuals will respond to your new emotional economy with respect and reciprocity. They'll recognize that your selective availability makes your attention more valuable, not less. They'll begin to offer their own vulnerability in exchange for yours, creating the mutual investment that characterizes healthy relationships. This transformation reveals how many of your connections were based on emotional parasitism rather than genuine affection. You've been functioning as an unpaid therapist, an endless source of validation, a psychological resource that others could tap whenever they needed emotional support without offering equivalent care in return. Your availability has been taken for granted precisely because it required no reciprocal investment. Your new emotional selectivity forces others to consider what they're offering in exchange for access to your care, attention, and emotional labor. This creates natural boundaries that protect your energy while attracting people who understand the value of mutual emotional investment. You discover that relationships improve when both parties contribute to the emotional well-being of the connection rather than one person providing everything while the other consumes freely. The people who remain in your life after this transformation are those who genuinely value your presence rather than just your emotional services. They're individuals who respect your psychological boundaries while offering their own authentic engagement in return. Your new unpredictability becomes your greatest strategic advantage, forcing others to actually pay attention to you rather than operating on autopilot assumptions about how you'll respond. When you're no longer the predictable source of comfort, validation, or problem-solving that others have learned to exploit, you reclaim agency over your own narrative. They can no longer script your responses or manipulate your reactions because they no longer possess the roadmap to your inner world that your transparency once provided. This unpredictability doesn't mean becoming erratic or unreliable. It means becoming less readable, less manipulable, less psychologically transparent to those who might use that transparency against your interests. You maintain your integrity while adding layers of complexity that require others to engage with you as a full human being rather than a predictable emotional resource. Your responses become your own again, instead of reacting in the habitual patterns that others have learned to trigger and exploit. You develop the capacity to choose your reactions based on your own assessment of the situation rather than others' manipulation of your emotional triggers. This psychological freedom transforms every interaction from a scripted performance into an authentic exchange. The people in your life are forced to relate to you as you actually are, rather than as they've learned to manipulate you into being. They can no longer press your psychological buttons with confidence because you've changed the wiring. They must engage with your current self rather than operating on outdated assumptions about your automatic responses. This transformation creates space for genuine relationships to develop because others must actually observe and understand you rather than relying on their previous psychological mapping of your character. They're forced to stay present and attentive rather than operating on autopilot assumptions about your predictable patterns. Your unpredictability also protects you from those who approach relationships strategically, seeking to understand your patterns only to exploit them for their own benefit. When you become less readable, these individuals lose interest because you're no longer offering the easy psychological access that made you valuable to them. You realize that your thoughts, feelings, dreams, and fears are not public property to be shared with anyone who expresses casual interest in your inner landscape. These intimate territories of self are sacred spaces that require earned access, demonstrated loyalty, and proven discretion before they can be safely explored with another. Your inner world becomes a temple rather than a marketplace, where entry is granted based on worthiness rather than curiosity, and where the deepest chambers remain forever your own. The recognition of your psychological sovereignty transforms everything. Your thoughts are yours to share or withhold based on your own judgment rather than others' expectations. Your feelings belong to you first, and their expression becomes a choice rather than an automatic response to external pressure. Your dreams and fears are precious aspects of your inner world that deserve protection rather than casual distribution. This doesn't mean isolation or emotional withdrawal. It means conscious curation of psychological intimacy. You begin to treat access to your inner world like access to any other valuable resource, carefully considered, strategically granted, and consistently protected from exploitation. You recognize that indiscriminate sharing devalues the very intimacy you seek to create. Your sacred territories of self become sources of power rather than obligations to others. The aspects of your inner world that remain private provide psychological refuge and strategic advantage. You discover that the parts of yourself that others don't know can't be used against you, manipulated by them, or exploited for their benefit. Deepest chambers of your psychological temple remain yours alone, spaces where you can think, feel, dream, and plan without external influence or judgment. These private territories become the foundation of your psychological sovereignty, the unassailable core of self that no relationship can breach without your explicit permission. You learn to distinguish between different levels of intimacy and psychological access, sharing different aspects of your inner world with different people based on their demonstrated worthiness and proven discretion. Your psychological geography becomes complex and nuanced rather than universally accessible, with public areas, private spaces, and sacred chambers that require different levels of earned access. From your new position of strategic concealment, you become an observer rather than a performer, watching how others behave when they believe they're not being psychologically analyzed in return. Your withdrawal from compulsive sharing creates space for you to study the people in your life with the same intensity they've been studying you, finally seeing their patterns, their manipulations, their hidden agendas that were invisible when you were too busy revealing yourself to notice what they were concealing. This transformation from performer to observer provides you with invaluable intelligence about the true nature of your relationships and the actual character of the people in your life. When you stop being the primary source of psychological entertainment, you can finally observe how others behave when they're not receiving constant emotional stimulation from your revelations. You begin to notice the subtle manipulations that were invisible when you were focused on sharing rather than observing. You see how certain people use strategic questions to extract information, how they create emotional atmospheres that encourage your confessions, how they position themselves as trustworthy listeners while carefully managing their own disclosures. Your new observer status reveals the conditional nature of many relationships that you previously believed were unconditional. You discover which people remain engaged when you're not providing constant emotional labor, and which individuals lose interest when you stop being a source of psychological entertainment. This enhanced awareness allows you to make informed decisions about your relationships based on observed behavior rather than expressed intentions. You can see the difference between people who respect your boundaries and those who continuously test them, between individuals who offer reciprocal vulnerability and those who expect unlimited access while providing minimal disclosure in return. Your silence creates space for others' true nature to emerge. When you're not filling every moment with your own revelations, you can observe how others choose to use the psychological space you've created. Some will respect the quiet intimacy, others will feel compelled to fill it with their own confessions, or attempt to pressure you back into your previous role as primary revealer. The strategic advantage of this observer position cannot be overstated. You finally possess the psychological intelligence about others that they've been collecting about you through years of your unguarded honesty. The desperate need to be fully understood, that driving force behind your years of oversharing, dissolves as you discover the profound power of being partially unknown, strategically mysterious, selectively accessible. You no longer need others' complete comprehension to validate your existence because you found something far more valuable. Self-possession, the quiet strength that comes from knowing you cannot be easily read, predicted, or exploited. Your savvy, mystery becomes your protection. Your discretion becomes your power, and your silence becomes the foundation of a sovereignty that no one can breach without your explicit consent. This transformation represents the final liberation from the psychological dependency that drove your compulsive transparency. You discover that the need to be fully known was actually a form of external validation seeking, an attempt to confirm your worth through others' complete understanding of your inner world. But complete understanding by others is neither possible nor necessary for your psychological well-being. Your strategic mystery becomes a source of inner strength rather than loneliness. You find peace in the private chambers of your mind that remain untouched by external judgment or manipulation. These protected spaces become sources of renewal and clarity, allowing you to engage with others from a position of psychological fullness rather than desperate need. The power of selective accessibility transforms your relationships from sites of potential exploitation into opportunities for genuine connection with those who prove worthy of deeper intimacy. You no longer scatter your psychological seeds indiscriminately, hoping that some will grow into meaningful relationships. Instead, you carefully cultivate selected connections with individuals who demonstrate reciprocal investment and authentic care. Your discretion becomes your greatest asset in a world where psychological information is constantly weaponized against those who provide it freely. You maintain your capacity for deep intimacy while protecting yourself from those who would exploit your openness for their own strategic advantage. The sovereignty you've constructed cannot be breached without your explicit consent because it's built on the foundation of conscious choice rather than compulsive revelation. Every aspect of psychological access to your inner world becomes a deliberate decision rather than an automatic response to external pressure or internal need. You have become unreadable to those who would read you with malicious intent, while remaining accessible to those who approach you with genuine respect and reciprocal vulnerability. This is the ultimate strategic position, protected from exploitation while open to authentic connection, mysterious enough to maintain power while accessible enough to create meaningful intimacy with those who deserve it.